So why is protein such an important topic, especially for people over 50? And I know you got a ways to go before you're even close to 50.
Yeah, I mean, we know as we age, our muscle mass and our bone mass steadily just declines. I mean, we decline about 0.5 to 1% of muscle mass per year once we hit age, I believe, 45, and then it continues to, compound from there. So muscle mass and bone mass is not only critical for helping support our metabolic health, but also for our independence and our longevity. So, one of the major issues is having a fall when you're older and breaking a hip or breaking a bone. That could be, a death sentence, unfortunately, or that could put you in a care facility where you're no longer able to be independent. So when it comes to quality of life, really making sure that we are prioritizing our muscle health and our bone health is very, very critical for overall health. Muscle also is the organ that's going to help us stabilize our blood sugar. It's going to help us stabilize our cholesterol, our heart health as well. And so just having more muscle mass on the body is going to just equate to more longevity down the road in general. And unfortunately, I think, there's a lot of people that have the misconception that protein is not as important when we're older, and that, our intake of protein actually decreases as we age for just a different things as well. But we actually have a higher need for protein when we get older because our body is less sensitive to things like muscle protein synthesis, so it needs more protein to be able to trigger that muscle to grow and to maintenance. And so we need to put more attention on.
How do you address questions about longevity and protein? Because on one hand, we have a lot of really good science out there that's saying that protein restriction increases longevity. Mm-hmm. But on the other hand, just like you've been talking about, it's essential that we're getting those proteins to be able to maintain muscle mass, and maintaining muscle mass in itself is going to increase longevity. And so I think that's one of the areas I've been struggling a lot with lately is like, where do I put the protein recommendations for healthy aging? I mean, obviously it's easy with athletes because athletes need to building protein or building muscle, but where do we kind of cross that line in the older adults? And I think it's probably easier if we just say, if we were lifting weights, then your protein needs are going to be even higher. So, but where do you put it?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of it comes down to the quality of our proteins as well, too. So a lot of people like to compare, more processed meats like hot dogs and salamis and sausages as the same thing as grass-fed, grass-finished beef or organic poultry, and they're not necessarily the same. And so I think as long as we're making an emphasis on our proteins coming from, healthy organic sources and grass-fed, grass-finished, we're going to be decreasing a lot of the risks that come with higher meat consumption. A lot of people are concerned about higher meat means that you're going to be getting a lot more saturated and trans fat in your diet, which can cause cardiovascular disease. But we know that the difference between like a grass-fed, grass-finished steak versus a conventionally raised steak, it has less saturated fat and it has better amino acid profiles and better vitamin mineral content in that. So I think as long as we make sure that the meat that we are sourcing from are good sources and high quality sources, we can decrease a lot of those risks that come with too much meat consumption as we age. But I mean, we do come from an aging population where meat and potatoes and fast food and all those things. I remember talking to a couple different patients that they consider going to McDonald's and getting a hamburger the same as if they were at home making a steak. And I'm like, those two are not the same.
Not even close.
Yeah, so I think that if we make sure that we're sourcing it appropriately. But I also do think that, limiting your protein in specific times can be beneficial, but in short terms, not for long term. So I think a lot of these diets that are popular can work really well in the short term to help correct issues and conditions. But then again, our body needs it eventually again. So making sure that we reincorporate it back into our diet.
I think there's a couple major points there. Is one, quality should be the priority. So we can eat less, but eat better when we do. Because a lot of people say, "Oh, it's so expensive to eat healthy because good healthy meat, that grass-fed beef is really expensive." Okay, well, if you're not eating the McDonald's burgers all the time, but when you're going to have some meat, you're enjoying good quality meat, that's going to be better for you. Yeah. And you're going to get better outcomes from the meat overall. And second would be, if you're eating meat, which has a certain level of pro-inflammatory components to it, which is the concerns for longevity, but you're eating a far more plant-based diet that has more anti-inflammatory benefits, you can counteract some of the negativity and get the best benefits out of the meat and the best benefits out of the fruits and vegetables that we're eating.
Yeah, definitely. And that's what I try to educate my patients on, is that making sure that we're pairing our protein with fibrous foods. So fiber has a really great component that it's able to help the body secrete excess cholesterol and those excess fats from our body that we don't need. So we do need, some of that cholesterol and some of that fat to help build our hormones and for building blocks of our body. But the excess stuff, when it gets stuck in our body and gets reabsorbed, that's where it causes issues. So as long as we're pairing those foods with high fibrous foods, we'll be in a good place.
So we're going to talk a little bit about plant-based protein versus animal-based protein. We've touched a little bit on quality and bioavailability. But you, as I recall, you were a vegan for over a decade.
Yep.
What made you switch to including, and I'd probably say you're probably not carnivore, certainly not carnivore, but you're probably leaning into what I would prefer to call more plant-centric or plant-oriented rather than simply plant-based, because a lot of times plant-based people just think vegan. But flexitarian, I don't like the term flexitarian as much, but
yeah, there's so many weird terms now.
yeah.
Yeah, so when I first became a vegan, I came from a very processed food diet. So I was eating, the bologna sandwiches, just anything that's processed, and I ate little to no vegetables. I hated vegetables, and the only time I liked vegetables if they were covered in cheese. So I had a very unhealthy diet. And then being in sports when I was younger, I noticed a really decrease in my energy, especially in high school when it comes to sports, just not being able to feel like I can really keep up as well as I used to be. So I started looking into diet and things that I can do to help promote my athletic performance. And I came across this book that was talking about veganism. And so I was like, I'll give it a go. Didn't think I was going to stick to it originally, but within like a week of doing it and force feeding myself vegetables, that was awful. I noticed just a huge increase in my energy. And I remember even my coach was like, wow, what did you eat before our training session? Because you're performing so much better. You have so much energy. You seem so much more vibrant. And so that alone made me just kind of reinforce, oh, this diet is working. This must be the best diet out there. And so I just kind of got into this wormhole of just, reading all the information that supports that lifestyle and that diet. And I did that for several years. But when I first started off, I did it completely wrong. I did start eating more vegetables, but then I also was eating a lot more of those processed meat substitutes as well too. And then kind of where my energy did increase for a little bit started to decrease again. And so I tried to look into why is my energy levels decreasing, and then I realized how many vitamin and mineral deficiencies I'm more prone to because being a vegan and being so restricted in my diet. And so I started supplementing a lot. And then it came to the point where I was supplementing, with 10 to 20 supplements a day just to try to fill in these nutrient voids. And then I took out the processed animal product or processed meat substitutes and just tried to do all whole foods based, but still was never able to hit my protein targets. And then if I was able to hit my protein targets, I was over consuming calories, which was also affecting my performance as well too. So it was just this hard position to be in, trying to do what's best for my body, but realizing that my body is also suffering. And then that's when I got into pretty intense weightlifting and, strength training. And I was just having a really hard time putting muscle on, even though I was hitting my protein goals and, supplementing with protein powders in there. I was just having a really hard time putting muscle mass on. And then it got to the point where I was having a really hard time recovering. And I noticed my recovery was decreasing, and I'm in my early 20s. I shouldn't have any problem recovering from exercise. But I would find myself being sore for, weeks end at a time. And I pretty much just, didn't think it was diet related. I thought I was doing everything right. I was supplementing. There was no way I could be nutrient deficient on anything. I'm filling in all the voids. And it wasn't until I went and got my master's in nutrition that I expected everyone to be vegan actually when I went there. And then to my surprise, no one really was. There was like me and maybe one other girl. And a lot of my professors just kept telling me how, that's actually not the healthiest diet for you to be on. You need to animal products. And I was refusing it. And then I worked in the clinic there. So I had patients and I started, experimenting a little bit on myself and doing lab tests for vitamins and minerals. And I was just having a really hard time maintaining adequate B vitamins, iron, vitamin D, critically low in a lot of essential vitamins and minerals. And even though I was supplementing with high quality supplements, it still wasn't moving the mark at all. And I was so fatigued. And it wasn't until I think my last year of my master's is when I decided I was going to start incorporating eggs again into my diet. And then when I started eating eggs, my B vitamins shot up almost immediately, which was very interesting, but very reassuring. And then I was nervous, about incorporating meat back into my diet because a lot of people say if you go this long without eating meat, your body's going to reject it. And everyone kept telling me, no, it's not the case. Your body's built to digest meat. But then I went into fish. I was like, okay, maybe I'll just be a pescatarian. And then immediately started feeling better. And then slowly just started adding meat in from there and realizing that my strength went up significantly within the first, probably, I would say 6 months. I was PRing all my lifts. My recovery was so much better. I was sleeping so much better. I was starting to experience hair loss, which was really scary being in my early 20s. And that was improving. And yeah, just overall, everything, just all my lab markers started improving as well, too. And so then I just said, okay, so I'm going to stick with it. But I will say being vegan for as long as I am really taught me how to eat vegetables and fruits and all those great foods and eat them and make them taste well. So I still have those same principles. And there's still times where I'll, still eat tofu or I'll still eat, something alternative. But I have the meat in my diet, but I'm also still eating a really high volume of fresh fruits and vegetables every single day as well, too. So I still carry those principles with me.